Welcome to the deep dive. I want you to picture a person standing at a literal crossroads. Down the path to the left, there's this glowing, idyllic castle on a hill.
Right.
And then down the path to the right is this dark, stormy, just completely terrifying haunted house with lightning crashing down. Which do you choose?
I mean, it's the ultimate cartoonish binary, right? A super safe choice versus this terrifying unknown.
Yeah, exactly.
But in real life, the choices that define our careers rarely look that obvious. Usually the haunted house is actually the path that's, disguised as the safe, comfortable trajectory.
Oh, for sure.
And that great castle, it's usually hidden behind this thick, terrifying forest of uncertainty.
That tension right there between the safe illusion and the terrifying reality, that's really the foundation of our discussion today. We're looking at a post from the Retrieving Thoughts blog.
Which is a great blog, by the way.
It is. And, if you follow that blog, it usually focuses on game production insights, technical deep dives, that kind of thing. But today's source material is an entirely different beast.
And that's super personal.
Right. It's a highly introspective look at the author himself, Murad Musakev, and his radical career journey from the incredibly rigid world of legal courtrooms to the absolute chaos of video game development. So let's learn more about a regular author and discuss his impressive path.
And the mission here today is we are going to explore how his specific skills transferred across completely unrelated fields. We'll dissect the mechanics of his career pivot and, extract lessons about professional adaptability for you.
Because it's wild.
Totally wild. The core truth we are examining is really how raw experience can be mechanically extracted from one industry and just deployed in another.
So let's begin at the breaking point. Because you don't just wake up one Tuesday and abandon a decade of rigorous legal preparation for a total unknown.
No, definitely not.
Right. Murad spent 5 years grinding on minimum wage just to become a judge. We're talking late nights in the courtroom, drafting endless legal documents, studying cases until his eyes bled.
Yeah, functioning on just a couple of hours of sleep a night.
Exactly. Barely enough time to go home, shower, and get back to the courthouse.
It was an all-consuming sacrifice. I mean, he played completely by the rules leading up to the final exam that would finally confer the title of judge.
Right.
So he reaches age 26, he's totally ready for the test, and he gets hit with an unwritten rule.
Oh, this part made me so mad.
Right. His superiors inform him that, unofficially, you need to be 30 to become a judge.
Which is insane.
It meant 4 more years of brutal, low-paid, sleep-deprived grinding.
So he decides to quit. And, okay, I need to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Because walking away at that precise moment feels incredibly reckless. I mean,
Yeah.
5 years of studying law, 5 years of practicing in the trenches, and you just throw it all away over a 4-year delay. Isn't that just paying your dues? Every prestigious career has a hazing period. You put your head down and you get through it. Quitting, then, is like grinding to level 99 in an RPG, pouring hundreds of hours into your character, and then, turning off the console right before you walk into the final boss room.
Okay, but that assumes the final boss room actually exists and isn't just, a mirage.
Okay, fair.
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychology of the system he was trapped in. That's what triggered the exit. It wasn't the work itself or even the 4 extra years.
Right.
It was the sudden, jarring realization that the system's rules were completely arbitrary. They were unwritten. If a committee can move the goalposts by 4 years today based on some unofficial vibe check, who is to say they won't move them again when he turns 30?
But, isn't that just a convenient excuse for giving up when things get difficult? 4 years is nothing compared to a lifetime appointment as a judge.
Is it, though?
Well, when he announced he was leaving, the senior judges told him he was making a catastrophic mistake. They told him he was too valuable, that he was throwing away everything he'd built, and that he would deeply regret it. These are people with decades of perspective telling him to just hold on a little longer.
Yeah, but those senior judges were basically acting as an immune response for the institution.
Wait, what do you mean by immune response?
Well, the institution protects itself by requiring people to believe that the outside world is impossible to navigate. If the people at the bottom realize they can leave and succeed elsewhere, the cheap labor pool dries up.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The guilt tactics and fear-mongering, they weren't about what was best for Murad. They were about validating the sacrifices the senior judges themselves had made. It's the classic sunk cost fallacy weaponized by an employer.
You believe you have to keep investing in a losing proposition simply because you've already invested so much. Okay, I see your point. The realization here is that the safe path was actually just a soul-crushing waiting game controlled by people who changed the rules on a whim.
Pretty much.
And only his wife and his best friend supported his decision. Just two people against the entire weight of his professional world telling him he was ruining his life.
Yeah, it's intense.
Stepping into the unknown at that point isn't reckless. It's a calculated act of self-preservation.
You have to be willing to brave the storm to get off a treadmill that someone else controls.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the aftermath of the leap. Were those 10 years in law just a total waste?
Definitely not.
Right. The source material makes it clear they absolutely were not.
Mm.
The courtroom exposed him to raw human nature in a way very few professions ever do. He had a front row seat to cruelty, greed, absolute foolishness, and just profound unfairness.
He highlights two specific cases that really shaped his professional worldview. The first was a civil case where 3 children were removed from their parents.
Oh, this story.
Yeah. And it wasn't because of abuse, neglect, or addiction. The parents were sober, kind people. The children were taken away strictly because the family was too poor to support a state-mandated minimum quality of life.
It is just a devastating scene. He describes standing in the corridor watching these loving but completely helpless parents whispering their goodbyes to their kids.
Right.
Telling them that this was for the best so another family could give them the life they couldn't afford. And Murad had to stand there and witness that, which taught him a brutal lesson about detachment.
Yeah, he realized that doing the legal right thing by following the letter of the law to ensure the children's material well-being felt entirely morally wrong on a human level.
If he let every case consume him emotionally, it would have shattered him.
Exactly. And you contrast that emotional weight with the intellectual rigor of the criminal cases he witnessed. He watched judges ruthlessly pick apart testimony, exposing massive gaps in logic.
Right, pulling on a thread until the whole thing unravels.
Right. Cases that looked completely airtight at first glance would disintegrate once they were properly challenged. He realized that sometimes the obvious criminal was actually just a scapegoat.
Which taught him to withhold judgment until absolutely all the facts are known.
Mm-hmm.
Never assume you know the full story just by looking at the surface.
Exactly.
But okay, let's unpack this. How does seeing people at their absolute worst going through profound tragedy help you ship a video game?
Well,
I mean, we are comparing a life or death tragedy to, like, a glitch in a character's animation.
right, the stakes are obviously different. A person's freedom versus a software product, but the intellectual framework required to solve the problem is identical.
It really makes me think of debugging code. In game development, when a massive bug crashes the game, the initial impulse is panic. You see the first error message and you want to slap a patch on it immediately.
Yes, Band-Aid fix.
Right. But if you do that, you haven't fixed the root cause, and you might actually make the system more unstable. You have to withhold judgment, trace the error back through the entire architecture, and find the actual root cause before you jump to conclusions. You can't just convict the first line of code that looks suspicious.
Exactly. If you jump to conclusions in a courtroom, an innocent person goes to jail. If you jump to conclusions in software development, you build an entire feature on top of a flawed foundation, and months later, the whole project collapses. The mechanism of investigation is exactly the same.
So that transition from legal logic to game development logic brings us to the stealth pivot. Because he didn't walk out of the courthouse and immediately start directing video games.
No, definitely not.
His entry was far less glamorous. He started as a copyright lawyer for a gaming company. I mean, he still needed to pay the bills, he had a law degree, and so he dealt with IP disputes, contracts, and licensing.
Right, and his first major challenge in this new world was an absolute trial by fire. He was tasked with moving intellectual properties and company funds to an EU legal entity for tax optimization and asset protection.
Wait. For those of us who aren't international corporate lawyers, what does moving IP and funds for tax optimization actually look like on a Tuesday? What is he physically doing?
Right, okay. So he is navigating different international jurisdictions to find the most legally efficient way to structure a company.
Okay.
For a game studio, intellectual property, the code, the art, the brand, that's their most valuable asset. Moving it to an EU entity might involve drafting complex transfer agreements, shielding those assets from regional liabilities, and minimizing tax burdens legally.
Right, so the studio can afford to hire more developers instead of losing their margins to inefficient corporate structuring.
Exactly. He had to learn British business law and financial regulations essentially overnight.
He described it as drinking from a fire hose. But that seemingly isolated, highly specific legal challenge became the exact stepping stone he needed years later. When he eventually had to set up a brand new studio in Cyprus for tactile games, he already had that edge. He knew how to structure international corporate entities.
Yeah, and often we see a difficult, stressful project outside our core competency as just a hurdle to survive. But Murad's experience shows that these isolated challenges are actually permanent additions to your professional toolkit.
Totally. And while he was working in this gaming company wearing different hats like you do in smaller teams, a slow evolution started happening. He was analyzing product roadmaps.
Yeah.
He was suggesting process improvements. He started looking at inefficient workflows and challenging them. Not because he was hired to be a producer, but because his analytical brain, which was trained in the courtroom to spot logical inconsistencies, literally couldn't ignore the bottlenecks on the development floor.
He was basically diagnosing the system. And over a couple of years, he realized he felt more like a game producer than a lawyer who just happened to work in games.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is where he maps his legal skills directly to game development. The first direct translation is mediation.
Oh, this makes so much sense.
In a courtroom, you have two opposing sides, high stakes, and everyone is convinced they are factually and morally correct. The judge's job is to cut through the noise, strip away the emotional outbursts, and get to the objective facts.
That translates perfectly into mediating ego clashes between creative teams, executives, and stakeholders. Like a lead artist and a lead programmer arguing over whether a feature should look good or run fast. That's just a lower stakes version of a courtroom dispute.
Yep.
The ability to read a room, knowing who is bluffing, who is holding a grudge, who is on the verge of burning out, it carried over completely. He could sense tension and address it before the development team fractured.
It's invaluable.
Yeah, and if you are listening to this right now and feeling stuck in HR or sales or construction management, think about how you mediate conflict daily. You are probably exercising a highly transferable leadership skill without even realizing it.
Absolutely. The second map skill is risk management. Law is essentially the formalized study of worst-case scenarios. Lawyers are trained to anticipate what could go wrong, who might challenge a ruling, and where legal loopholes might be exploited by a hostile party.
And game development projects are massive piles of compounding unknowns. You have shifting priorities, changing market trends, and technical limitations you didn't anticipate.
Exactly.
His legal brain was hardwired to predict catastrophic failures before they happened. While other producers might just react to a production bottleneck or a feature suffering from scope creep after it becomes a problem, Murad was anticipating those loopholes months in advance.
Which is such a superpower. And the third, and perhaps most fascinating translation, is documentation and AI adaptation.
Yeah, this part blew my mind.
Right. Lawyers live in a sea of sprawling, chaotic, multi-year information. Their primary skill is condensing thousands of pages of contradictory testimony into concise, clear, actionable legal briefs.
Okay, but how does writing a legal brief train you to talk to a robot or manage a tech team?
Because chaos management relies on the exact same core structures across industries. In a fast-moving game studio, nobody has time to read a wall of text. They need clarity, and they need it immediately.
Makes sense.
Murad took that legal brevity and applied it to organizing production pipelines and writing postmortems. But more importantly, it made him uniquely suited for modern AI-driven workflows.
Because AI doesn't understand intent, right?
Yeah.
It only understands structure.
Exactly. Prompt engineering requires setting logical constraints so the system reaches the precise conclusion you need without hallucinating. A legal brief leaves no room for ambiguity, and a well-engineered AI prompt requires the exact same structured, precise language.
The idea that drafting a legal brief directly trains you to be better at AI prompt engineering in a tech studio proves that the underlying architecture of a skill is what matters, not the specific industry application.
Exactly.
He stopped seeing his legal background as a wasted past life and started using it as his competitive edge over producers who had only ever worked in the creative industry.
Which brings us to his vindication, because he experiences this quiet aha moment at 29 years old.
Yes.
He is living in Copenhagen, leading projects for an international game studio, helping creative teams thrive, and he realizes he is genuinely happy.
Think about the contrast with his old colleagues from the courthouse. The ones who told him he was making a huge mistake, the ones who gave in to the institutional fear tactics, they were still exactly where he left them.
Just waiting around.
Doing the same tasks, still waiting for that unwritten 30-year-old rule to pass, hoping for a shot at an exam that might not even guarantee a judgeship.
But he refused to be paralyzed by the sunk cost fallacy. And that choice shaped his entire leadership philosophy. When he left the law, he promised himself he would never become the kind of manager people dread working under.
Right.
He wasn't going to be the authority figure who micromanages or pushes teams to the point of burnout, mirroring the toxic system he escaped.
Instead, he found his deepest satisfaction in the team's daily wins. We're talking about administrative victories that sound small, but completely alter the daily quality of life for a developer. He convinced the company to switch task tracking systems, optimize flows through value stream mapping sessions, and ran educational workshops.
Right, and let's clarify value stream mapping for anyone outside of corporate project management.
Yes, please.
It is the process of literally drawing out every single step a task takes from an initial idea to a finished product and hunting for the bottlenecks.
Give me a tangible example of how that works in a game studio.
Okay, so imagine the creation of a 3D model for a sword in a game. The steps are concept art, 3D modeling, texturing, animation, and finally integration into the game engine.
Okay, pretty straightforward.
Right. But if the artist finishes the texture but has to wait 3 days for an email approval from a lead designer before handing it to animation, that 3-day wait is a massive bottleneck. It wastes time and kills momentum. Value stream mapping identifies that friction point so you can redesign the approval process. Murad approached those workflow bottlenecks the exact same way he used to hunt for legal loopholes.
Fixing a task tracking board removes friction. Seeing the relief and the growth in his teams when that friction disappeared felt better to him than any legal case he ever solved.
Yeah.
He built teams that were among the happiest, healthiest, and most productive in the company because his focus was on removing their obstacles, not extracting their labor.
We have journeyed from a soul-crushing courtroom to a thriving tech studio in Copenhagen. So if we distill this down to actionable mental models for you, the listener, the first is what we can call the goalpost principle.
Which is?
Recognizing when a system is extracting your labor via arbitrary, shifting rules versus offering a guaranteed reward, you are not trapped by the time you've already spent in a system that doesn't respect your timeline. It is never too late to switch careers.
So what does this all mean for you? The second mental model is skill extraction, the ability to separate the mechanical framework of a job from its industry context. Your past experience is never wasted. Courtroom conflict resolution is team mediation. Legal risk assessment is project risk management. Condensing legal briefs is AI prompt engineering.
Exactly. The context changes, but the human machinery of the skill remains highly adaptable. The safe path is often an illusion designed to keep you stationary. Real exponential growth only happens when you push yourself entirely outside of your comfort zone to apply them.
The link to the full article on the Retrieving Thoughts blog is in the description. I highly recommend you read Murad's own words, as his perspective on navigating these transitions is incredibly grounding.
It provides an excellent roadmap for anyone questioning their current professional trajectory.
We want to leave you with a lingering question to chew on today. Look closely at your own daily routine. If you stripped away your specific job title today, like if you completely deleted the name of your industry from your resume, what are the underlying adaptable skills you use to survive the chaos of your work? And more importantly, what entirely different world could you conquer with them tomorrow? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Catch you on the next one.